Hi and welcome everyone. Lag and mobility while trying to learn what the biggest semiconductor foundries of the world are. The exercises are adjusted for me, so if you follow along with the exercises, it is at your own risk. So, the first exercise, and first of all, a semiconductor foundry, is someone who manufactures semiconductors, just manufactures them. A fabless semiconductor designs them, so they are fabless, they don't fabricate them, and an integrated device manufacturer, they do them all. They do all. They design, sell, and fabricate. These are just the foundries. So the first one is TSMC. It stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company Limited, TSMC. So here's quite something written, so I'm reading. A semiconductor is a material between conductors and insulators. So conductor is a material which lets electricity flow very good. That is, for example, aluminium, copper, steel and gold. An insulator is something which lets electricity flow badly, which is, for example, wood, glass, plastic. So semiconductors are in the middle of them. Semiconductors are, for example, silicon, germanium, and gallium arsenide. So semiconductors don't really let electricity flow, but also don't stop it really. When is here written? An electric current flows by adding a group free element. So elements with free valence electrons. Valence electrons are electrons outside of the electron at the outer side. Not the outer side, but more outside of the electron than in the center. And these are, for example, boron and aluminium. They have free valence electrons. And when they are added to the semiconductor, silicon, they create a P-type semiconductor, a positive type semiconductor. If a group 5 element is added, they have 5 valence electrons more outside of the electron. For example, phosphorus and arsenic, they create a negative type, N-type semiconductor. The negative type semiconductor has no one electron too much. The positive misses one, and when they combine as P-N junctions, positive and negative, type connected as P-N junctions, the electric current can flow. So silicon has 4 valence electrons. Silicon's, our semiconductor, has 4. Boron has 3. So if we now add boron to the silicon, there stays a void, a hole. And phosphorus has 5 valence electrons. So if we add phosphorus to silicon with 4, there's 1 electron too much. And that's because when we add phosphorus, it becomes positive type, and if we add boron with only 3, it becomes a negative, because we have 1 void, we have 1 too less, so it's positive. So now we have created positive and negative semiconductors. And they combined are P-N junctions. And through them, an electric current can flow in one direction. And let's get back to the task. We go TSMC and then Samsung Semiconductor and Global Foundries. So TSMC, Samsung Semiconductor and Global Foundries. And it goes on. Using a P-type semiconductor, a positive one and a negative one, which we have created by adding phosphorus or boron to the semiconductor silicon, we can create a P-N-P transistor with a positive, a negative, and a positive one. Or a negative, a positive, and a negative one, or something like that. So now we have a transistor with a positive semiconductor, a negative semiconductor, and another positive P-N-P semiconductor, which we have created by adding phosphorus. I think it was by adding phosphorus. By adding phosphorus with 5, so you have a negative one. And by adding boron with 3, valence electrons to the silicon before, we have a positive one. So we take P and P, one positive, one negative, and another positive. And now we have a transistor. The iPhone 6 runs with Apple A8, and the Apple A8, with which the iPhone 6 runs, has 2 billion of these transistors. So inside the iPhone 6, where the Apple A8 is, there are 2 billion of these transistors. And a transistor is a positive type semiconductor, negative type semiconductor, and another positive type semiconductor, or also negative, positive, negative, with different versions. The next exercise. If a transistor is charged with an electric current, it is switched on. So these transistors can be charged, and then they are then switched on. And when they are switched on, they represent the number 1. And if they are uncharged, these transistors, then they represent the number 0. So these transistors, of which there are 2 billion in an iPhone 6, are either switched on or off with electricity. And if they are on, they are the number 1. And if they are off, they have a number 0. These zeros and ones can be understood by the smartphone and if necessary translated. So for example, if there are transistors and there are some on and off, the smartphone can read them, and if one is off, because it's uncharged with electricity, then it's a 0. And if there are a bunch of them, for example, a 0, a 1, a 0, a 0, a 1, another switched off, switched off, switched off, charged, charged, uncharged, uncharged, and charged, that means then high. The greeting expression high. If a smartphone wants to store high, so if you type in high and smartphone wants to store it, it knows that it should remember H and I. Translated to binary code, that is 010010000 for H and 01001001 for I. The smartphone uses now the transistors made out of a P-type and an N-type and a P-type. P-type made by adding a group 3 element, N-type by a group 5 element to the semiconductor to store the zeros and ones. So the smartphone knows that it should store the letter H and goes and switches a bunch of transistors on and off. And these transistors are made by P and P-type semiconductors, and these P and N-type semiconductors are by adding phosphorus to silicon to make a P-type and boron to silicon to make a N-type. Phosphorus to make an N-type, boron to make a P-type. Let's look at it again. Boron for positive, phosphorus for negative. But you can also use other ones. Instead of boron, aluminium, or instead of phosphorus, arsenic and other ones. And silicon is not the only semiconductor type. So you add a boron to make positive and phosphorus to negative. And then these zeros and ones are stored. Some transistors are getting charged for the 1 and some are getting uncharged for the 0. So the smartphone goes and switches some of these transistors on and off by charging them with electricity. And if they are charged, they are switched on, and that is the number 1. And if there are a bunch of ones, the smartphone knows that it's the letter H, for example. And the smartphone, if necessary, can work with them, store them permanently, display or send, or etc. And the 10 firms, the largest foundries of semiconductors in the world, are TSMC, Samsung Semiconductor, and Global Foundries. And then UMC, which is the acronym for United Microelectronics Corporation, SIMC, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, Hong Semiconductor, Tower Semiconductor, Power Chip, Next Chip, and Vanguard. And we have a last exercise. So, a semiconductor is a material which does not really conduct, like gold or aluminium, but also not as bad as an isolator like wood, glass, or plastic. And if we add to the semiconductor, for example, silicon, which has 4 valence electrons, boron with 3, there's no 1 too little, there's a void because boron has only 3 and silicon needs 4. And if we take phosphorus and put it to the silicon, phosphorus has 5, so 1 too much for the silicon, there's 1 over. And now this 5th one can perfectly bind with the void of a boron one, with a negative one. And now perfectly the positive one, the positive type semiconductor, can bind with a negative type semiconductor. And they create a P-N junction, and a positive, a negative, and a positive junction create a transistor. And these transistors, of which are, for example, 2 billion in an iPhone 6, can be charged and uncharged. And if they are charged, they represent the number 1, and if they are uncharged, they represent the number 0. And if we take a bunch of these zeros and ones, the computer can decode them, this binary code, and print out readable letters. And the 10 largest of these firms, foundry firms, produce this. Foundry firms manufacture it, fabless firms design it, and integrated device manufacturers do it all. Are the 10 largest: TSMC, Samsung Semiconductor, Global Foundries, UMC, SMIC, Hong Semiconductor, Tower Semiconductor, PowerChip, NextChip, and Vanguard. And this is the end. I thank you very much for your attention, and until the next time.